Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Just to You podcast. My name is Eric Nicole, and I'm your host. If you are a first time listener, welcome to the conversation. And if you're a regular, I'm honored that you've decided to join me for another episode. The Just to You podcast is centered around a network of conversations which are meant to connect us, to inspire us, to find our own confidence, our own voice, and to live our own truth. And who knows, we might even learn a little something new that ultimately allows us to live in the sweet spot that I like to call the just do you space of being. Each week, I have the privilege of sitting down for unscripted conversations with friends, family, colleagues, community leaders, and influencers that all share their own personal journeys. I hope that you enjoy our time together as much as I have. We are certainly going to laugh, and yes, we might even cry a little. But in the end, we're going to know that we're not alone during our life's journey. So, are you ready? Great, let's do this. Welcome to the conversation. All right, everyone, welcome to today's episode. I am really excited. This is part 2 of my conversation with the iconic Bamby Salcedo out of Los Angeles. Hi, Bamby.
Hi, good to see you again, and greetings and many blessings to all the beautiful listeners.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. To remind the listener, we had our first episode recording a couple weeks ago. I was actually in Hawaii on business, and you and I were chatting and having an amazing conversation. And about an hour into the conversation, I realized that we probably could have gone on for several more hours. So I asked you if you would be willing to break it up into two. So this is part 2. And for our listeners who have possibly not listened to the first episode, we encourage you to do that. It's a powerful conversation. So, for our listeners, again, Bamby is a prominent and celebrated transgender Latina activist. She's known all over the world for her passionate and productive social, political, and economic influence. She's the president and CEO of the TransLatin Coalition up in Los Angeles, and she leads nationally recognized organization that advocates for and addresses the issues of transgender Latinas throughout the United States. Her accolades are many. She is incredibly humble. You will hear through the first episode, she's a trailblazer and a change maker in our world. And at our last conversation, episode 1, Bamby, you left us with this final quote, which I'm going to read, which is going to be the launch pad to this second episode. And we were talking a lot about the trans community, specifically women, and the rates of HIV infection and the need for advocacy and education and social outreach. And the very last statement that you said, we know that we can shift the way society sees us. We've created those changes, and now is that pivotal moment for all of our communities to really step up and stand with trans people and fight. I'm hopeful. I've always been hopeful. That's why I'm still here. My hope has kept me here for almost 30 years of service to my people. And so I'm hopeful that we can change the world as we want and live in a world that we want to live in. And I thought that was a really powerful place to stop. And now it's a powerful place to pick up. We're a couple weeks in to this new year and this new administration and this new environment. And I want to continue the conversation where we were. Can you give us a little bit more insight into the needs of the community, especially now, and how we as a community, both the LGBTQ community as well as our allies, step up and help?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think it's important for us to understand and recognize that what we're experiencing as a community is not something new for us. Trans people have been under attack for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
But what is different about this time is that social media has been very important for us as a community and as people to be more visible. And we have seen, and everybody is seeing, and the world is seeing the evolution that has happened specifically, I would say, in the last 10 years in the trans
Mm-hmm.
community. There have been many different translate groups that have popped up, and including our organization, for instance. We started being funded in 2016. That's when we got our first official grant. And so like for the first 6 years, we were doing volunteer work. And so we have been, gaining some rights, gaining some policy wins. And obviously we have an extra conservative, right-wing, extremist group of people who don't want for us to be part and be integrated into the tapestry of our society. And so they've done anything and everything that they can to strip us from the little gains that we have gotten. And that includes obviously our government and the institutions really that sort of drive our society, that being religion, politics, education, and all of those things.
Yeah. Stop there for a second. Let me ask you a quick question, because this is something I've thought a lot about the last couple of weeks. And this is your opinion. What do you think they're so afraid of? Not the trans community, those that are coming from.
No, but
what are they afraid of?
I think it's true that trans people, like, we are hated by the world because we get to live our truth. And that is something that I think the world needs more of. If we are truthful with ourselves and if we are able to understand our humanity, then we can take the first step to go into the world that we all want to be part of. But change, that we're scared of change. And that's really what the world is not ready for.
But I think that's an important and very powerful statement to make, in that we are hated. And I think specifically we're relating this to the trans community, because the trans community tends to get a lot more play, if you will. And the fact that it's potentially because you get to live your truth and they don't, is, if you look at what's being portrayed in the media and from the comments they're making, it is glaringly true that they don't get to live their truth. Why should we? Why should the trans community get to live theirs? And at some point, we also have to call, I think, the spade and say, we don't like change. I get that. But we also don't, and the collective we, don't always like it when someone is different than we are or what we think should be the norm.
Right.
And so what I find so hurtful to not only the community, but also to the people who are standing in judgment of the trans community and of the LGBT community, is I feel sad for them. Because when someone is living their truth, when someone is living their authentic life, there is an immense amount of joy and love and compassion and caring. When you get to live your truth and you're able to be yourself, to me, that's what this world needs. And I feel sorry for the people who don't get to live that truth. And it's not easy. The process and the journey to get to that truth is not easy. But once you're there, it takes work, but it is such a blissful place. And I feel bad for the people who continue to come at our community and who voted in such a way to potentially eradicate us, which we know is not going to happen. But I feel sorry for them. And it's not empathy. I feel sorry for them, because at the end of the day, everybody is human being. We're all human beings. We're all part of this amazing fabric and network that make up the human race. And as I shared in the last episode, when I sat down with Archer and had a conversation with him, he opened my eyes to a completely different experience, even towards my own community. When I sat down with my friend Zoe, who happens to be Black, I had a completely different perspective on where she and her community have come from. And it takes that opportunity to have a conversation, to sit down and just be open. And so the work that you do and the work that the organization does, I think, is remarkable, because you not only are out there providing services and product and support and the things that the community needs, you're also out there having to create an opportunity for people to see the community differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we as an organization are very clear on what we are doing, and
Hmm.
we have a clear vision for our people. And the truth is that despite everything that is going on, everything that we experience as people, as a community, what we want to make sure is that our community is empowered enough to not just live their truth, because once we take that leap of faith, because it is a leap of faith when you get to live your truth, like when it's not easy, particularly for trans women, to leave
Hmm.
that privilege of being a man to being uh, to become a part of an oppressed group of people. None of us dream or think when we were little that we were going to come to be sex workers, or that we were going to come to be incarcerated, that we
Yeah.
were going to be criminalized because of who we are. That's what essentially our government is doing.
Hmm.
It's putting messages in in people's minds to ultimately criminalize us, to say
Hmm.
that we are not worthy of
Hmm.
living, that we are not
Hmm.
worthy of being part of our society. That's why
Hmm.
they are denying opportunities for us to participate in sports, for instance, or having the ability to be safe and change where we think we're not going to be violated, and they're using narratives to
Hmm.
say that we are sexual deviants, that we
Hmm.
are. It's incredible how even our elected officials, Congress people, like they refer to us as chicks with dicks, for instance, or even calling us trannies, which
Hmm.
is an offensive term
Yes.
for us. And so this is language that elected officials are using against us.
Yes.
And so all of that is happening. And that is why we as an organization exist. We
Hmm.
believe in the empowerment of our community through service provision,
Yep.
because we know that our people are not having access to the services and support that we need. And
Hmm.
it comes to the basic things. Like, for instance, we give lunch every day, we have clothes, hygiene kits. If someone from our community needs a tent, for instance, who's living on the streets and don't want to go to a shelter because it's worse to go into a shelter
Right.
because of their experiences that happen there, they rather go to be on the streets. And if it's a tent that they need, we support our community with that. But in addition to that, we have built a multiplicity of services specifically designed and created really to support our
Hmm.
community.
Yep.
So we have services, housing services, violence prevention services, legal services, reentry services, supporting people who are getting out from jail, prison, or immigration detention. We have HIV prevention services. We have a program specifically supporting trans people who are aging, because that's another population that we don't think about. We are all aging, but we're not thinking a very specific group of people who were neglected many years ago, and now
Hmm.
that they're aging, they continue
Yeah.
to be neglected.
They're still neglected. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for us, aging trans people is one of our priority populations.
Hmm.
But in addition to that, we also do macro level work. So we do policy, we influence policy, and we believe in influencing change in the institutions that marginalize us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do that through research, policy. We do what we call cultural transformation training, and we also create our own content. Like
Hmm.
we also do work on narrative change. We're able to tell our own stories. We film our own stuff. If I want to invite all the listeners to also visit our YouTube channel and
Yeah.
subscribe to our social media to see what we do. And
Yeah.
what we are doing truly is, bringing light to dark times.
Yeah. Exactly. And so needed. Let's take a minute, if you will, and let's have an educational moment, because I was having a conversation with someone last week, and although we got deeply into the conversation about our episode, yours and mine, there were some questions that I thought were really interesting because, again, it's just a moment of we're not being educated. Obviously, and please correct me because I may get some of this wrong, one can transition from male to female to male. Does someone have to have the surgery in order to be considered trans?
No,
Mm.
I think that is a misconception.
And I want to clear that up right now. That's why I asked you. So help me clear that
Yes.
misconception up.
Yeah, there are people who, what we do, what we call social transition, and that is actually recommended for people. And that's actually part of the guidelines that W, for instance, have. Do you know who WPATH are?
No, why don't you tell us?
WPATH is the World Physicians Association. So basically, they have put guidelines
Hmm?
to before you get into having life-changing gender-affirming surgeries, for instance,
Mhm.
that you do social transition. That's why one of the guidelines is that they recommend for someone to be at least living in the gender that they feel most comfortable for at least a year, in addition
Mhm.
with counseling.
Yes.
So that people know what it is, right?
Mhm.
To live how you
Yeah.
know is best. And so many of us are not necessarily using hormones, for instance, although hormones is one of the things that are important to many of us, but some of us don't use them for several reasons,
Mhm.
right? And so, no, I think it's important to recognize that identifying as a trans person is a self identification,
Mhm.
right? And so nobody is forcing anybody to identify as trans or whatever. So,
But the misconception's there. So let's drive that point home. The misconception is that I could decide tomorrow that I want to be female and go off and get the surgery and become trans. And that is simply
it's
not the
not.
case,
It's
not
not.
only with adults, but it's not the case with children.
No, I remember this one time when the now elected president said in one of his speeches, "Imagine your children going to school and then coming back with a sex change operation."
Yes. Yes.
That
It's
is
ridiculous.
not that is not how that is. Like, it's a process. And we also have to understand how our healthcare system works. How long it takes
Right.
for an insurance to approve
Yes.
something.
Yes.
And so all of this rhetoric that has been
Mhm.
built and based on lies is what people believe. But I think we have to understand the power of words and who says those words.
And what those words are doing to the people that are going through this transition is it is incredibly painful and hurtful and sometimes can, you know, take a direction that is just not necessary because of all those harsh words
But
and
but
the
I think you're associating it with surgeries. Yes, it is true. It is true that surgeries are painful and they're dangerous
Mhm.
because anytime anyone that is being submitted to have some type of
Right.
surgical intervention, right? Like dangerous.
I'm talking about though the mental effect on hearing that, knowing that you're going to go through the transition or you're in the process. Let's say that year where you are living in your true identity and you are contemplating surgery and you are working with your doctors and your therapist and the people that are there to help you with this transition. And you're hearing all of this nonsense, all of the lies, all of the rhetoric, all of that coming at you. That has to play an effect on your mental health. That's the danger that I'm talking about. So
But
when
I
you,
think, yes, but I think I think we also have to understand, right, that taking a step as to verbalizing and affirming
hmm
who you are as a
hmm
person, like
hmm
like from that moment on, it has ripple effects.
yes,
Right? It's very scary to think that you want to confide
yeah,
in the people who you trust and the people who you think you loves you. And then I'm
right,
talking about particularly young people and their parents. Not every parent is supportive of their young trans or gender nonconforming
Right.
children. And because of the messages that they have heard, and not
Mm-hmm.
just today, but from before,
Mm-hmm.
what happens primarily in people of color families is that they give us the streets. They disown us for verbalizing who we are. And for us, this is who we are. And so for many of us, particularly again, trans people and primarily trans women of color, is that we, despite of that we're going to go through, we go through not only our families' abandonment, but we also essentially we chastise from society.
Mm-hmm. And are you saying it's more the male to female than the female to male?
I'm going to say trans women are the ones who have been more visible historically.
Okay. Point.
They're obviously transmasculine individuals. They are now what we know as gender nonconforming people, but historically, trans women are the ones who have been at the forefront.
Sure.
And that's how all of our community has been judged on, basically. And that is the first thing that happens, though. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying for people to understand, that when we make this decision to be who we are, deeply in our hearts and in our souls, then all of these other things happen. And then, of course, many of us don't necessarily have the ability to pay for surgeries or to do all these other things because we're preoccupied on surviving. That is why many of us resort to the street to get hormones, to inject substances in our bodies, for instance, that are not healthy. We produce a documentary that is called Dying to Be a Woman. The people can find it on our YouTube. And it's about silicone injection. But trans women don't necessarily know what they're putting into their bodies. And we see time and time again how these solutions that we put into our bodies eventually rotten because those are foreign to our bodies. And so those are the consequences. Now, over the years, we have been able to advocate and to really push for adequate healthcare for trans people. And so that's why they are not enough, but more clinics that we're doing that work. And now, because we're getting that support, now our government wants to shut them down.
Yeah.
Right? And that support has been also offered to young people, which is essential. People don't really understand that then when we have the care that we need, both social, mental, physical, all of those things like that making a person healthy, support us to be better people, like in the long run. That is why you don't see many trans people who are lawyers, many trans people who are teachers or judges or any of that, because we have been suppressed by our society. There have been mechanisms from all different angles to keep us in the margins, right? And that is what's happening right now.
We talked a little bit about this on the first episode and the importance of our own community really standing up and supporting and helping. I'm curious as to if you have any thought as to why, even within our own community, there is a segregation between the gay men, lesbian, transgender. There seems to be this kind of separation. Do you have any thoughts on why that is?
I think one is because trans people did not move along with the gay and lesbian community when back in the 60s when the gay liberation movement started. And so there is actually documentation as to when trans people have been pushed to the side by gay men. And we know that the gay and lesbian community right now is very powerful. They have been able to get a particular status within our society, and that's not the same for trans people. And let me just give you an example.
Please.
I don't know if you know this, but there is what is called the DSM manual, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's called the DSM. And they have been different iterations. So right now they are on the DSM-5. When they were doing the DSM-5, there was this, I guess, battle to, because some of us want to be removed from the DSM, which is essentially that is a manual that says still to this day that trans people are essentially crazy because although it was moved to now be gender dysphoria, that is a diagnosis that we have to receive in order for us to be able to have access to health services, like some surgeries that we may need.
Wait, so say that again. So what's the diagnosis that you have to get?
Gender dysphoria.
So you have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria in order to get healthcare.
To get surgeries, essentially.
Surgery, yeah.
Yeah. So it's part of our healthcare. And so that
Wow.
the gay community was also part of the DSM, but they were removed in the 70s. And 50 years later, trans people continue to be there. And so that is one of the main reasons why people create this message that we're crazy. And essentially, trans people, in comparison with the gay and lesbian community, we are about at least 40 years behind, legislatively, academically, economically, you name it. And so there's a disparity even then. And so that unfortunately has historically happened, even in our own community. Like it's only been as of lately, let's say maybe 10 years, that
Mhm.
where we're lumped together as a community, LGBTQ, right? Now
Mhm.
they keep adding more letters, QI plus, but it's only been that long. In our own community,
Mhm.
there's still a lot of ignorance, even with
Yeah.
gay men
Oh, yeah.
and lesbians. I know of cases to where like the lesbian community don't accept trans men.
Mhm.
And it's the same that happens. Many gay men still don't want to accept the reality that trans women exist. They still think that we're crazy, or they still think that we are only supposed to exist to draw for dollars, right? That we are
Mhm.
only performers, that
Yeah.
it's hard. And it's also surprising sometimes for members of the gay and lesbian community to see us integrated into our society.
Mhm.
Oh, she's working here. Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Oh, she's an executive. Oh, wow. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's not a normal thing.
And it's very, I keep using the word sad. It's disturbing, to be honest, if I can use that word,
Yeah.
that a community that has lived under oppression would even fathom oppressing members of our own community even further. And yet it doesn't surprise me because I've seen it happen and exist between the gay male community and the lesbian community. In a city that I used to live in, I would never see the lesbian community out. And I went to an event where there were 300 lesbians as celebrating a gala dinner. And my guest and I sat with these women, and they were incredibly powerful and wonderful and charming and funny. And I said, how come I never see you out? And their response to us was, we don't have a seat at your table. And I have never felt so small and so embarrassed in my life, and asked them to continue to have the conversation. I said, what is it about that we can do to help? And it really was about building a table to sit together with our entire community of brothers and sisters that span the lesbian community, the trans community, the queer community, the bisexual community, all of that. It's about building a new table. And so when I even came to San Diego and I started the networking organization, my experience of networking groups had always been this kind of cisgendered white gay male population. And I refused to start the organization unless we included everyone in the acronym. And we made a point to do that. And what was so interesting, Bamby, was the women, the lesbian women, trans men, trans women would come up to me over the course of the 2 years that I ran the organization and said, thank you for creating a place for us to come and feel safe and to feel heard and to feel accepted. And it always brought tears to my eyes that they actually had to come and say thank you for something that my ignorance allowed me to believe was just assumed that they were always included. And although I can't apologize for an entire segment of this community, I'm sorry that the community has not always welcomed our trans community with open arms. And again, I think it's also because the leopard is the leopard, spots don't change. And I think that we have to get to a point where we all come from a place of humanity and not necessarily our differences. Our differences are what make us beautiful and unique, and our humanity is what should bind us and bring us together. That's my Pollyanna view on it. And I know that's easier said than done, but I just, I long for the day that we can just exist in our humanity and respect everyone for who they are and include everyone. I don't know that's possible right now, but hopefully we can rebuild to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, that is my hope. That's what I'm working towards. Really, for me, is I wish I could live in a place to where a trans person is not afraid to walk down the street thinking that they're going
Mhm.
to be killed simply because of who they are. That is our reality, right? Or even attacked or harassed, even
Yep.
from our own members of our own community. And so that's I wish I get to see that, even though I may not. But I think there's something for us to really think about and really think about what are some of the things that we can start doing, right?
Yes.
For us
Yeah.
to get to that place.
Yes.
And it's I think it's very doable in my opinion. Like, I think if we can start one, like we talk about behavior change. And so if we are start thinking about changing our behavior, because
Yep.
when we change our behavior and we practice, like then it
Mhm.
becomes like normal. Part of that is also thinking the way we think people and understanding that the systems that we have in place within our society are exactly designed to keep us how we are right now, to keep us
Mhm.
pain and getting chance. So if we are able to really think that and be conscientious that if we continue to follow how the system is set up, the truth is that people who have been oppressed
Mhm.
become oppressors.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is exactly what has happened in our community, particularly in the gay and lesbian community. We were a group of people who were oppressed. We got to a better place, and then we get to think that others are less than.
Yep.
And that is what is happening with the current administration. Even many members of our own community voted for this person, thinking that it was going to be better, not really thinking on the potential effects that could have happened because of that. And so, if we are able to really be conscientious about what is this world that we want to really build, but think about that, but also say what we mean or learn to say what we mean what we say. And along with that, put it into practice. And
Mhm.
then little by little, then our behavior will change.
What are some of the ways that our listeners could participate, encourage their friends and family to participate? What are some of those actions? Is it watching your documentaries? Is it getting involved in the
Well,
community? What do you think that first step
some
is
of those things help, but I think, like they say, like the change begins with me.
with you?
Right?
Hmm.
And again, and that's what I'm saying. If we're conscientious
Hmm.
about what we're seeing, what we're doing, then we then put those thoughts, right, into
Hmm.
action, right? And that
Hmm.
is when the behavior takes place, right? And then that's
Hmm.
how the behavior change happens. If we are able to recognize something, right, that we perhaps are doing wrong, like the way we think of people, how are we thinking of trans people? Do we think that all trans women, for instance, are sex workers? That
Hmm.
do we think that all trans women are addicts? Do we think that all trans women should be incarcerated? If we think that, then there's something wrong with us.
Hmm.
And we need to think a way of shifting that. If we really believe in social justice, if we even understand what social justice is not just for some of us, the justice should be for all of us.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm saying, even in our own community, in the gay and lesbian community, we get to be at a place to where we're better, and then everything else is not an issue. That's why we
Yes.
don't get involved.
Hmm.
But if we believe in social justice, if we believe that everyone deserves equity and equality, then we should participate in making that happen.
Mhm.
Not think that is not my issue
Yeah, you
just
can't
because I
have,
have a better social status.
and I think people will struggle with the comma and to that statement. I believe in social justice, comma, except for this community. I think people are going to struggle with that because I don't think they really understand that you can't have it just one way. It has to be for everyone.
And that's why we are where we are today politically. Right?
Exactly. And yet I stand in, like you had your comment about having hope. I stand in the hope that through breakdown comes breakthrough. And so if I don't think that way, I want to pack up my stuff and move to Spain. So I'm thinking that way.
Well, that's
So
people who have the ability to do that. Many of
right,
us don't
but
have the ability to do
I
that.
I don't. I'm just part of me
I'm
wants to
just
pack.
saying, like people
No, I
who have the
know.
ability to that,
I
they're
know.
actually
I know.
talking about that.
They're already talking about it. But at the end of the day, all that does is because here's the funny thing, no matter where you go, there you are. No matter where you go, there you are. So you bring with you all of that inheritance that you've gained over the years. Ignorance and uneducated is not something you leave behind. But I think that if we can get to a place, like you said, of being mindful about what that really means, what social justice really means, and start there, it's a really great place to be able to operate from. It doesn't mean that you have to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything about one's lifestyle. It just means that you have to believe that everybody deserves justice.
Yes, but also if you really believe that, then you need to do something about it.
Correct. Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. But we're not going to get everybody to sit and say, I agree 100% with X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think we can get them to a
But
place.
then we're going to continue to be where we are.
Fight me on this because I agree with you. As that
Yeah.
came out my mouth,
Yeah.
Bambi, as it came out my mouth, I said, that was the dumbest thing I could have said because that's
No,
going to
I'm
keep.
just saying, like for the
No,
listeners,
yeah,
yes, you might think, oh, it's easier to say than done, but then
I'm
we
just going to
have to
say where we're
start
at.
somewhere. That's what I believe. That's what I am working towards. And if that is what people believe, then they should be truthful to what they believe.
Yeah.
And we need to eliminate this hypocrisy that we continue to live,
Yeah.
right? Again, they are members of our community. There are many communities
Mhm.
that I intersect
Yes.
that voted to have this
Yes.
administration.
Yes.
And
Because of
so,
cheap eggs.
you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So we can we can be flip-flopping like that.
Yeah.
It's either one way or the other because we cannot continue to oppress our own. We cannot
Yes.
continue to say that we believe in equity and equality when we are pushing or when we are the marginalizers.
Yes.
It does not make sense.
That
Anyways,
could be a whole,
that's an
that could be a,
invitation.
that could be a whole other episode. The oppression of our
For
own
sure.
could be a
For
whole
sure.
other episode. A whole,
For sure. I mean,
seriously.
we can have many conversations.
What's so fascinating, Bambi, is one of my guests on my podcast last season was talking, and she is this incredibly talented and brilliant social activist. She happens to be Black, and she was talking about the oppression within her own community and representation. And so, where I see this conversation going is that everybody can be mindful and everybody can be aware of the thoughts and the feelings and the conversations that they're having out into the world. And some of those conversations are going to have to be pretty difficult to get us to a place that you and I are talking about. There's going to have to be some real moments of ownership and acknowledging our words and our thoughts and our actions in order for us to move past that. We're going to have to get really clear, like you said, that the people who voted for this administration, who are going to be completely surprised with the results and with the process, are going to have to answer to themselves. I don't necessarily need them personally to answer to me, but they're going to need to answer to themselves because they're not going to get what they were promised.
And that is happening in all communities.
All communities. That's what I'm saying.
That's
All communities.
that is happening with the Latino community, with the immigrant
Yes.
community.
Immigrants. Yes. We haven't seen the rest of it. Where do you see the coalition moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years?
I can tell you some exciting things that we're doing. For instance, we know that here in Los Angeles specifically, we know that the federal government is going to be craziness for the next couple of years because
Mm-hmm.
we know that we have elections in 2 years, and hopefully we can flip the Senate and
Yeah.
Congress. And
Yes. Yeah.
so I'm going to say for the next couple of years. So for us as an organization, we're focusing really doing work across the states to ensure that members of our community who are coming from other states here, because we're seeing this migration because of what's happening in other states.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that our community are also supportive the way they need to be supported. And so this year we're doing budget advocacy at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
We have identified a legislator who's pushing for our budget advocacy, and we're asking in this legislation for $30 million for the next 4 years.
Wow.
To be able to support other translate organizations across the states. So we're optimistic that is going to happen.
Excellent.
In addition to that, here in Los Angeles specifically, we have been able to introduce what we call the TGI-WE, which is TGI stands for transgender, nonconforming, and intersex, and WE stands for wellness and equity. And we introduced a resolution, and the Board of Supervisors approved to allocate $7 million in this year's budget to support translate organizations to be able to provide services.
Wow.
And at least 9 organizations will receive $500,000, and they're going to be able to provide services and also receive the capacity support that they need to build their organizational infrastructure. And right now, we are also doing the same with the city of Los Angeles, and we're advocating for $3 million with them, so to have a total of $10 million to support translate organizations. And so that is what's happening. And in addition to that, this is more like in the next 2 years, we are in the process of building a new center. So we purchased a 24,000 square foot property in the heart of Hollywood, and we're building a 3-story building, and we are going to have about 80,000 square foot space of services for our community. We are using a social enterprise model. So we're going to have a restaurant, a beauty salon, and a boutique. And then we're also going to have a rooftop that we can rent for events. And the restaurant will serve as a caterer to the events. We're also going to have a performing space for our community to do events for our community. And we are also going to expand our services. We're going to have our own gender affirming health center at this place. And so, we need to fundraise for this. So if any listeners, if there's any rich person that wants to support building this dream a reality, please get with us, and we'll be happy to blast your name all over the place. All we need is $15 million. So even if you want to donate $1 million, we welcome it. But whatever you can to support our work, whatever it is, and however you think you can support our work, it's much appreciated and very much needed at this times.
We're going to make sure that we put the link to not only the coalition, but also to your YouTube channel so that people can take that first step and watch and learn. If there is anybody who can go out and raise this money, it's you.
It's us.
It's us,
all of us.
It's all of us, but with you at the helm,
Yes.
Bamby, I'm telling you, I hope you'll come back and join us again, and let's further this conversation. For now, I'm going to put all the information so people can find out about you. But I want to say just 2 parting comments, and then I have a final question. First of all, thank you for who you are, not only for the community, but also for the world, because I truly believe that change comes from conversations that exist out in the universe. Meeting you has been life-changing. I'll be forever grateful to Richard. But the world is a better place with you in it. For sure. The world is a better place with you in it. And I'm so grateful to you for all that you do for our trans community, which is a beautiful community. My last question. In episode 1, you shared quite a journey from childhood and the things that you experienced that brought you to this place that you are in today. If you could go back and stand next to that young Bamby, what would you tell her, or what would be the advice would be that you would give her about her life today?
Ah, mm. Before I tell my little Bambi what I need to tell her at this moment, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And for this conversation, I think it's super important, very much needed, especially in these times. And I think my hope is that our conversation bring light to the darkness that we are all experiencing right now. That in some ways people are enlightened. And so shout out to all of the listeners and thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
But what I will say to the little me, I will tell her that I love you. You are an incredible human being. You deserve all the love and all the support that is out there. You're going to be an amazing person. Just keep walking on your path the way you're destined. And you're going to be great because you are a beautiful being and you are a divine creation. So there's nothing that will stop you from realizing the dreams that you have always had. So keep walking towards those dreams and know that there is no impossibles. There's only you. That's what I say.
I'm going to leave it there. Bless you. And I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay.
Bye for now.
Be well. We can.
All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on today's episode. I hope our conversation resonated with you like it did me, and I cannot wait to sit down with you all again next week. Remember to subscribe to the Just You podcast on your favorite platform so you can make sure not to miss a new episode, which drop every Thursday. If you like what you hear, you can easily share the podcast and episode directly with your friends. And if you would, rate us and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. You can also follow us on Instagram at JustDoYouPod. As you go out into the world today, remember to just do you. All right, talk next week.